do not know who the student was. I don't even think I saw him. He was wearing black. He didn't look very large. Male student. He was out there shooting. It looked like he was climbing out and shooting. And somebody, I said, what is that? I said, what's going on with this? It's fire cap gun. It's probably the video production. You know, they do these videos.
Right.
And the kids, they say, well, that's not, you know, a play gun, a real gun. I was going out there to say no. And I went, oh my God, that was really close. That'll be
Okay. What's your name, ma'am? Patty?
Everybody get up right now. Please go to the library. Please get everybody get up right now.
Okay.
I have him in the library shooting at students for the lady that I have in the library on the phone.
Okay, try and keep as many people down as we can.
The chilling conversation we just heard was recorded during the infamous shooting at Columbine High School in 1999. Since then, the Chicago Tribune estimates that there have been more than 188 mass shootings at schools and universities in the United States alone. When you include shootings that occur in places other than schools, the statistics are even more staggering. Last week on What's the Matter, we discussed the topic of active shootings and how to survive when an active shooter is in your midst. We learned survival tips from leading experts. Whether you choose to run, hide, or fight, when it comes to violent critical incidents, most people think they have a plan. But according to our expert Warren Kennedy, most people are not mentally prepared to survive by any means necessary. With mass shootings occurring more frequently than ever before, have you armed yourself with knowledge? Do you have a survival strategy in place? If so, have you discussed it with your family? Advice that could save your life and the lives around you. When we return from a short commercial break. Welcome back. We're here with Lieutenant Augst. Lieutenant, welcome. And Lieutenant Brown, welcome. Both of you work in SWAT and you respond to active shooting events. What's a typical shooter scenario? Are they schizophrenic? Are they impassioned? Are they trying to up the number of killings that somebody else perpetrated? I mean, what motivates a shooter?
It's not what our society considers to be normal, and there can be a lot of reasons behind why it's not normal. Mental health issues, or medication or drugs, or different things. But at the end of the day, it's not a normal behavior for people to do that. We're dealing with people that they look at the notoriety that the last guy got, and a lot of times they're motivated by exceeding that number, or getting more notoriety, or being the number one active shooter. It's not something that normal people would think about.
All right, is there anything that you'd like to tell our audience about protecting themselves from an active shooter incident?
With the ALICE system of active shooter response for civilians, we're trying to give people tools that will work regardless of whether the hardware is there. They still can make those same decisions to increase their survivability.
Give me the redacted version of ALICE.
The redacted version is make yourself a hard target by moving, yelling, distracting, or evacuating if you can. The hardest target is one that's not there at all. So if you can leave, I would leave.
One of the primary principles of ALICE was alert. So let everybody know what's going on, because some people may not know what's going on. And then also notify 911. Of course, we're probably going to be getting inundated with 911 calls if an active shooter situation does occur.
Sure.
But at least call 911, give descriptions so that responding officers know at least have an idea about what to look for and where they last were seen, so that we have somewhere to start.
Are the active shooters often students in the schools or teachers? Is it oftentimes the shooter is homegrown, so to speak, as opposed to a perfect stranger coming in?
Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. It just all depends on what the mindset of that individual was. The one in Connecticut, his mom was a teacher there or a worker there, so you had that one. The one in Columbine, he was a student there, or those two were students there. So it's a mixture of everything. Sometimes it may be a husband of a teacher, and they've gotten into a domestic, so he's going to go and say, well, I'll show you, and perform an active shooter there whenever he's actually looking for his wife. Or there's really there's nothing set in stone that it's always going to be a teacher, or it's always going to be a student, or it's always going to be a spouse. You just have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
All right, listen, thank you both for coming here today. I really appreciate it. I'm sure there's a lot of great information that you've shared with our viewers that may just help them one day.
We hope so.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank
Lieutenant
you.
Brown, Lieutenant Ross, thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
We have with us Rebecca Torcaso Sanchez, who actually was involved in an active shooting event at Virginia Tech.
The date of the shooting was April 16, 2007. I was in a dorm building that was across from a small field from West Ambler Johnson, which was a dorm hall where the initial shooting took place. The shooter, Cho, had targeted a young woman who lived in that building, who he had been stalking, and she had rejected his advances, and he was upset about that. So he sought her out, and he shot and killed her, as well as a resident assistant or RA in that building as well. Shortly after that, he kind of went off the radar and reloaded and got additional ammunitions and things, and then he targeted an academic building on the other side of campus where most of the victims of his actions were killed or injured. At the time of the event, the police on campus had assumed the first shooting was an isolated incident, and the communications to the student body as a whole was delayed and a little bit limited because they had assumed it was an isolated incident.
Yes.
So when the shooting happened, I and the students I was with at the time did not realize anything was happening at all. And shortly after that is around when the campus-wide notifications went out about the active shooting situation. So campus was put on lockdown. We, at the time, being young and not really sure what was going on, didn't know how to emotionally process the information we were receiving. So we experienced a wide variety of emotional reactions in the moment. We were naively relieved that we probably weren't going to have to take our 8 a.m. exam. We were confused about, what was happening on our campus, and we weren't really sure where to turn for information or really sure how long we were going to be in that situation. The rumors indicated that shooters were literally right outside of our building at different points. We could hear noise from outside, but it was hard to determine what we were hearing. So in the moment, it was really very confusing. For me, it wasn't until the following day that I had confirmed the deaths of a friend of mine and the deaths and injuries of some of my fellow classmates as well. That's when I think emotionally I started to really realize the gravity of the traumatic experience that I was a part of.
Rebecca, did the university respond correctly, and did you respond correctly given what happened? Look in retrospect, now that you look back.
The shooting at Virginia Tech was a learning opportunity for many campuses to figure out how to respond better to these events. After that event took place, emergency notification systems were installed in a lot of campuses. I remember our dorm buildings went to secure access where you needed a swipe card or something like that to enter the building. Security features like that were put into place in campuses all across the country. And campus police really took a step back and reevaluated steps that they could take to be prepared for these things ahead of time, and then also really doing a good job of communicating with students and faculty about how to behave in a situation like that.
Rebecca, tell me about your PTSD. Does it still bother you to this day?
Yep, so I've been diagnosed with what's called chronic PTSD or long-term PTSD. People who experience traumatic events can have acute PTSD, which is kind of a short-term, significant response to, a traumatic circumstance. And chronic PTSD can be exacerbated by experiencing multiple traumatic incidences. A month to the day before the shooting, I was raped by another student on campus. And I actually was supposed to have my campus hearing for that event 2 days after the shooting took place. So that was postponed, and that was another traumatic experience that I was dealing with at the time.
What would you like to share with our viewers about your experience being in the presence of an active shooter?
I would say that while we believe that these things may not happen that often, or that it's unlikely that it may happen to you, it's important to be prepared and to think through how you would respond and how you would keep yourself and your loved ones safe if you were to find yourself in a situation like that. I think it's important to consider policy that can inform safer gun laws in this country, and to keep our communities safe.
On that, we're going to have to go. Rebecca Torcaso Sanchez, thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate it. Okay, we're here with Warren Kennedy, someone who has spent years and years and years working on active shooters and training law enforcement to deal with active shooters and teaching people what to do in the event that they're in a church or a school or a movie theater or a restaurant or a business.
Anywhere.
And an active shooter walks through the door.
You only have 3 choices. You can run, you can hide, or you can fight. Doesn't really matter which one you choose. You just got to be committed to what you choose.
Now, I have a concealed weapons permit, and I've thought, well, maybe I would draw my weapon. But then I thought, it's real problematic because in a facility where there are many people, even the number of people we have here today, if I fire my weapon at one person, it could hit somebody else, an innocent bystander. I might be prepared to defend myself and my family, but against an assailant, but I don't know that I'm prepared to shoot somebody else.
There's more to it, I think, than buying a gun, paying your fee to the sheriff, and getting a permit and carrying it. If you cannot adequately and properly maintain your skill, I don't recommend it. Now, I'm all for the concealed carry. Please don't misunderstand that. But I think you got to be responsible, and that is be proficient with the gun that you're carrying.
I've done a lot of work with the FBI over the years, and I used to train in their FATS unit, which is a large black box, and they have simulated events with an instructor standing by, and you have a laser weapon that you use, and so the computer is recording the accuracy of your shots and whether or not you should shoot. And what I found very interesting is the number of times that I inadvertently shot someone who was innocent, and I didn't shoot someone who was an assailant, because they create these scenarios where you think somebody is being aggressive. You know, they're reaching for what you think is a weapon and they pull out a doll.
Right.
So you really do need that training. If you're going to commit to wear a weapon, you really do need to have some training before you use it. We began the show with some audio from Columbine. A teacher is in a schoolroom. Her students are hiding. She calls 911. There's an active shooter. I can hear the gunshots out in the hall.
Patty's her name, I believe.
Yes. And the 911 operator says, lock the door. And she says, I'm afraid to lock the door. I don't want to go lock the door. And the 911 operator says, please go lock the door. And of course, the next thing is the gunman comes in, and every time you hear a round fired, a child is being killed. And she too died in that.
Monday morning quarterbacks, and no one's criticizing what took place that day, because until you find yourself in that situation, you don't know how you're going to react.
Right.
With Columbine, there was a door exit that if those kids hadn't have hid under the table, they probably could have exited that school. But now, that's not being critical.
No. And perhaps other teachers watching our show can learn by that experience.
With Columbine, officers waited to enter, because prior to Columbine, it was surround and hold and wait for SWAT. Since that time, we've now moved in law enforcement officers, even if you're by yourself, you go in and confront the shooter. I will tell anybody that how things play out in real life is totally different than what you ever envision, okay? The shooting where me and my 2 officers were involved, at the time, there was 45 caliber handguns being carried. And you watch movies and you think when someone gets shot with a 45, you got all this idea, everybody's seen the Dirty Harry movies.
Sure. Make my day.
Yeah.
Not like that.
It's not like that. Yes, things happen very quickly. If I played the audio tape, the dash cam, because of where we were, it's all audio when you stop and you think and you watch the clock, what took place in less than 2 minutes. It's a big eye opener. And the good thing for us is the officers went home that day.
Yeah.
Training worked, okay? It was a good shoot. Nothing's ever come out of it because it was a good shoot.
Did the shooter go home that day?
No, he didn't.
No.
It's a shame that a life was lost that day. But the officers that were tasked to do a job did their job that day totally within the scope of the law.
What's the one thing that you want to leave our viewers with when it comes to a critical incident where people are being shot? Somebody's in there with a weapon and they're shooting, or whether it's a knife, whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
What's your...
I'm going to steal it straight from, my dad was a firefighter, had a firefighter's funeral when he died, and I'm going to steal it straight from the firefighters. Have a plan. It's that simple. Have a plan. So it's second nature.
Well, you've given us a lot of information in order to know how to put that plan together.
And there's not one set perfect plan, because our terrain changes every building we go in.
How can folks reach you, Warren Kennedy, if they want
WarrenKennedyNC.com.
WarrenKennedyNC.com.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. This is such a timely topic, given what just happened at Squirrel Hill in Pittsburgh.
And our thoughts and prayers with the victims.
And as mine are. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing this insight
Thank
with
you for
our
having
viewers
me.
today.
Thank you.
We now know what to do in the event an active shooter is close by. These situations are more common than ever, and it's important to arm ourselves with knowledge and be prepared with a survival strategy. We've heard from leading experts about how to survive whether you choose to run, hide, or fight. We've also learned techniques for distracting a shooter if you find yourself looking down their loaded barrel. If you overhear or notice suspicious behavior from a coworker, your children, a fellow student, friend, or colleague, don't hesitate to report it to your local law enforcement agency. School resource officers are another great avenue for reporting suspicious behavior. Be vigilant. Just one phone call could save potentially dozens of lives. That's all for this episode of What's the Matter? I'm Chuck Whitlock. And remember, if it matters to you, it matters to us. See you next time.